This video is sponsored by AIAIAI Headphones. The song A Day in the Life by the Beatles is generally considered to be their crowning achievement, their most ambitious recording they ever made. It took over 34 hours of studio time to record this song. For some context, 4 years prior, the Beatles recorded their entire debut album in under 16 hours. This song is basically two different songs, one written by John, one written by Paul, stitched together with this crazy orchestral glissando in the middle, and all ending with one of the biggest and most epic piano chords ever played. So today, I'm going to recreate that. We'll start with the most foundational instruments of the track, the acoustic guitar, the bass, and the piano. On this track, the acoustic guitar was played by John, and the piano and bass was played by Paul. And there's no electric guitar on this track, so there wasn't really a role for George Harrison. So his only real contribution to this track is maracas. And I don't have any maracas, so I'm going to play the egg shaker for George. When the Beatles first recorded A Day in the Life, they didn't know yet how they were going to connect John Lennon's section of the song with Paul McCartney's section. These two sections were in different keys and were in fairly different tempos and vibes. So what they did in the meantime, before they came up with the iconic string glissando idea, is they just kept a 24-bar gap between the two sections. And because, of course, they weren't working on a DAW like I am, they had to count that gap out. So they had their assistant and road manager, Mal Evans, count out 24 bars, and at the end of those 24 bars, sound an alarm clock. Now, before long, the Beatles worked out what they wanted to put in these 24-bar gaps that they had left in the song. They wanted a massive orchestral crescendo that would sound like, in John's words, the end of the world. And they achieved this by asking the orchestral players to start on the lowest note that their instrument could play, and over the 24 bars work their way up to the highest pitch they could play, which was in an E major chord, because that section would end on a big E major chord. They recorded a 40-piece orchestra made up of woodwinds, strings, horns and percussion, and to make it sound even bigger than a 40-piece orchestra, they recorded it 4 times and layered the recordings over each other. Now, recreating this is certainly going to be awkward because I can't exactly listen to the original and transcribe what was played by the orchestra because they're all chaotically weaving their way up to this E major chord. So what I've done is I've taken a sort of 3-pronged approach. In the same way that George Martin handed the orchestral players a very loose piece of sheet music, instructing them to go from the bottom of the instrument's range up to the top, I've notated out these 8 different lines that effectively do that, travelling from the bottom of the instrument up to the top in chromatic movement, and then in Ableton I've assigned them to various different orchestral instruments. On top of this, I've used the various orchestral sounds on my Mellotron to add extra chromatic lines on top, and to add even more chaos to this crescendo, I'm going to play my own violin, which I can barely play, but in this example, I think that'll actually be quite a good thing. One of the most famous parts of A Day in the Life is the massive E major chord that gets played at the very end of the record. And this chord rings for ages and ages because as the chord faded out, George Martin was pushing up the faders on the desk to allow it to continue sustaining. On top of that, it's not just one piano we're hearing, it's actually 3 different pianos layered on top of each other and a harmonium played by George Martin. So of course, to achieve this, what I'm going to be doing is playing the same chord on 3 different piano sounds, 3 different piano VST instruments to create that massive thunderous chord. Also, interestingly, the original idea wasn't to have a massive piano chord, but was instead to have loads of people humming the same note together. And we can actually hear this on one of the earlier takes of the song. So at the very end of A Day in the Life, after we have that very dramatic piano chord, we get a very high-pitched noise, and then a 3-second loop of nonsense. And the meaning and the purpose of this loop is lost on anybody who's not listened to Sgt. Pepper as a LP, as a vinyl record. because at the end of a final record, when the needle has reached the end of the spiral groove, it enters what's called the run-out groove, a circle in the middle of the record, which the needle stays in that circle until you turn the record player off. And the Beatles, with their cheeky sense of humour, thought, let's take advantage of this little loop at the end of a record, and rather than filling it with silence like on every other record ever, let's put a bunch of nonsense in there, so when the record comes to the end, you're just left with this infinite loop of nonsense until you get up and turn your record player off. So I'm going to try and recreate that nonsense loop now. The Beatles created it just by splicing together a bunch of studio chatter, so I'm just going to have to listen to what they did and try and pick out a few moments and create my own one. Doobie never gives me any. Ba-ba-ba-ba. Ho 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 ho. So we're almost ready now to listen to the final track, and just before we do that, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, which is AIAIAI Headphones. As you may have noticed, I've been using these wireless AIAIAI headphones throughout the video. They're so helpful for moving around the studio, trying to record stuff quickly without being tethered to your audio interface. And they connect really easily. You just connect wirelessly to this pack here, and then plug it into your audio interface like you would normal headphones, and you're ready to go. So thanks again to AIAIAI Headphones for sponsoring this video. If you use the coupon code David Bennett and use the link in the description, you'll get a free hard case when you order your own pair of wireless headphones. Now, the last two remaining elements that we need to add to our recreation of A Day in the Life are the drums and the vocals. With the drums, last time I did a recreation with I Am the Walrus, I did the drums myself, but the drum part on this song is far more idiocentric. There's loads and loads of little fills and stuff. It was going to be a lot harder for me to learn it and perform it. So instead I got my friend Zal Jones involved to record the drum part, and on this occasion I got my friend Chris Vince to record the vocals for both John and Paul. And with that, we have our entire recreation of A Day in the Life. Let's see how it sounds.
Woke up, fell out of bed, dragged a comb across my head. Found my way downstairs and drank a cup. And looking up, I noticed I was late. Found my coat and grabbed my hat, made the bus in seconds flat. Found my way upstairs and had a smoke. Somebody spoke and I went into a dream.
Shooby never gives me any. 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 Shooby never gives me any.
So thanks for watching, and thanks again to AIAIAI Headphones for sponsoring this video. One of the reasons I was recreating A Day in the Life is that in a few weeks I'll be doing an analysis video where I go through the song and look at the music theory behind how it works. So if you're interested in that, do make sure you subscribe to not miss out on that video.